Welcome to the Wolffpack Fitness podcast with your host, Adrian Wolff. I'm a PhD student in interdisciplinary health sciences with a master's degree in kinesiology and a bachelor's degree in psychology. I've been a fitness coach for over 10 years and I've trained everyone from everyday gym goers to kids to Division I collegiate and professional athletes. My mission is to provide you with actionable knowledge in the areas of fitness, nutrition, stress management, and psychology to help you live your best life every day. Let's get to the show. What's going on, Wolffpack? Welcome back to another episode of the Wolffpack Fitness podcast with me, your host, Adrian Wolff. If you're liking the content I'm providing, please pause this episode, follow my podcast, and submit a quick rating if you're listening on Spotify, or a review if you're listening on Apple Podcast. And this is going to help me reach more people. So as you know, I have a passion for sharing knowledge and helping others with their health and fitness, and I really can't do it without your help. So thank you for continuing to listen and helping me grow my podcast. Before I get into this episode, I want to make it known that this podcast is separate from my teaching and research roles at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Okay. So in this episode, I'm going to discuss some of the most important reasons why you should think twice about playing sports to get in shape. I start off by talking about my life experience as an athlete and how I eventually settled into recreational sports, sustained through consistent training in the gym. Then I help you answer the following question. Is it better to play sports to stay in shape or get in shape to play sports? And I do that by sharing some anecdotal information from personal interactions I've had with adults who have been playing recreational sports for varying lengths of time and have been afflicted with either acute or chronic injuries, despite having good intentions about improving and maintaining their health and fitness. Then I get into some research studies on injury rates in several common sports that many people play recreationally. I expand on the types of injuries that are common in these sports and why they tend to occur. I finish up the episode with some recommendations on what types of exercises you should be doing to minimize your risk of sustaining an injury and maximize your performance so you can have more fun while playing your recreational sport for a very, very long time. As always, I end the episode with the action item for you to work on to optimize your lifestyle and live your best life. All right, so I want to start off by talking to you about my history with sports, what I learned from this history and the sports I played, and how I began to apply a fitness routine later in my life to support and sustain my athletic endeavors. So I've been playing sports in one form or another since I was 5 years old. My parents got me started early by taking me to the local ice rink in Chicago and lacing up some skates on my feet. The first day, I was skating with the assistance of a chair in front of me, and by the second day, I was skating on my own, and soon after, I was wearing full hockey gear and playing competitively with other kids. So it didn't take me that long. It's clear that I had a gift for athletics, and I would continue participating in them throughout my life, all the way to this day. As I progressed through childhood, adolescence, and early adulthood, I gradually started taking on other sports, with hockey always being primary until I finished high school. I played soccer along with hockey until I reached high school, and it was a nice complement to hockey because I would play it during the off season. So that kept me active all year round, and shout out to my parents for that, whether it was intentional or not. So thanks, guys. As I reached middle school, I actually took up skateboarding. So this is not a traditional activity that we would consider a sport, but nonetheless, it is a fantastic activity that trains balance, coordination, and muscular power and something called eccentric strength, which is your muscle's ability to absorb large amounts of force. So if you know anything about skateboarding, imagine a skateboarder doing an ollie where they pop the skateboard up into the air and then they come down and land on it. Well, that landing really creates a lot of ground reaction force coming back up at you that you need to absorb quickly. So skateboarding is actually pretty tough in that respect. And I'd also like to mention the hip and core strength you need for it as well. So I actually have a lot of respect for skateboarders for the skills and physical abilities they need to develop to perform well. And to be honest, I sucked at it pretty badly, and I stopped after a couple years, but I still credit it as a contributor to my development of a well rounded athletic profile. So once I reached high school, I took on tennis actually as my new hockey off-season sport of choice. I honestly don't remember how I got into it, but I don't know, maybe my parents took me out, I think, to the park and started playing, and I liked it enough, and, I made the switch, from soccer to tennis. So, anyway, I played it all 4 years along with hockey. Then, as I reached my college years, these sports started to taper off, and military specific training started to take over. So, I started doing more activities like calisthenics, which are body weight exercises like push ups, pull ups, sit ups, and squats, which you guys are all probably familiar with, resistance training, running, and swimming to prepare for my chosen military career path. But these exercises actually go back to my high school days, where my desire for doing them really sparked a consistent routine. And I maintained, modified, and added on to them throughout my career in the military and in the fitness industry as I continued to learn more about which types of exercises were ideal for achieving certain goals, like building more strength and endurance, improving my mobility, and minimizing my risk of injury. And I credit the absence of any serious injuries from sport, and serious meaning those that would require surgery. So I've never had any surgeries, knock on wood, due to injury from sport. And I credit that throughout my life to a consistent fitness routine that consists of resistance, cardiovascular, and mobility training. So, as I record this now, I'm 36 years old. I'm in very good metabolic health with minimal aches and pains. And once again, knock on wood. I exercise consistently 6 to 7 days a week while varying my exercise intensity. So some days are harder, some days are easier. And I also use my fitness that I develop in the gym to perform well during the recreational sports that I choose, like hockey and golf, for example. So I don't rely on these sports to improve and maintain my fitness. And that is the main point I am getting to. So I left the military at 27 years old. And if I had decided just to stop my fitness routine and try to maintain my health by playing hockey, tennis, and soccer, or just one of those sports, sure, I would have maintained to a certain extent specific physical abilities that those sports require, like coordination, agility, and speed. But over time, I would have started to lose muscular strength, stability, power, and flexibility, which are all key components for optimal performance and injury prevention, especially if you're playing sports recreationally. So it's important to understand that even though you may have played sports for a while, that does not mean that your muscles and joints are moving in ways that are efficient and safe. So that's why you see everybody, professional athletes in a lot of different levels, have strength and conditioning coaches to correct any muscle imbalances and inefficiencies that they see so they can perform well in their sport. So let's use the following hypothetical example to elaborate on my previous point. So let's say you were an athlete all the way through high school and maybe even college. Then you stopped playing your sport competitively and switched to recreational play without doing any sort of resistance or mobility training. And let's let's simplify mobility training by call it flexibility training in this episode. So even though they're different, I think flexibility is an easier word for most people to identify with and visualize. So if you have any sort of movement deficiency or inefficiency, meaning that your muscles are being activated at inappropriate times or not being activated enough when they should be, and this can be largely due to common movement patterns we see in sports. If you do not correct that deficiency or inefficiency in the gym with specific resistance training and flexibility exercises, your body will default to those poor movement patterns during your sport, especially when you're fatigued. That's important to know. And this oftentimes leads to poor performance and worse, an increased risk of sustaining a contact or non contact injury. So I want to differentiate those two. A contact injury is an injury that's sustained through body on body contact or body on object contact. This type of injury is somewhat out of your control, but you can minimize your risk through a consistent fitness routine, which I'll talk about later. A non contact injury is an injury that is sustained through certain movements where you do not have a collision with another body or an object. So these movements include jumping, accelerating, decelerating, changing directions, and throwing, for example. So I've come across many former competitive athletes who play recreational sports as adults that have injured themselves through these kinds of movements. But this is even more important if you did not play competitive sports in your younger years, or you took a very long hiatus and started playing them in your 30s, 40s, or even 50s as a means to get yourself back in shape. I've worked with and met many more people in this category and have heard of many injuries, a lot of which are non contact, including sprained ankles, ruptured Achilles tendons, shin splints, stress fractures, hip replacements, specific and non specific low back pain, groin strains, shoulder, rotator cuff, and labral tears, tennis elbow, tendonitis, and many more. You get you get the idea. I just wanted to make that point there. I've seen all of these. And this leads me to some research I want to cover to illustrate the prevalence of these types of injuries in adults who play recreational sports. I'm going to cover 4 common sports many adults play recreationally. So those are pickleball nowadays. It didn't used to be as common. Think before COVID, and then COVID happened, and all of a sudden pickleball just blew up out of nowhere, which is great. But also basketball, soccer, and ice hockey. So now, before I get to the injury rates these studies talk about, I do want to say that playing recreational sports does have tremendous benefits for your physical and psychological health. So I am not saying that you shouldn't be playing them, despite the title of this episode. I want to make that absolutely clear. But what I am saying is that you should be taking the information on injury rates and the types of injuries that are common seriously, and consider the exercise recommendations I talk about later if you want to continue playing these sports for a very long time and reap the benefits of them. All right, so let's start with pickleball. So I looked at a review paper published in 2024 in the Journal of Physical Activity and Health, and they discussed the physical, social, and psychological effects of playing pickleball as an adult. Some of the results that they found were that pickleball can improve a person's stress levels and perceived well-being. They also reviewed a study that compared physical activity expenditure in walking to pickleball. And the study showed that pickleball had a 36% higher average caloric expenditure and 44% higher perceived exertion compared to walking. And this makes sense since you're running around and elevating your heart rate much more than walking. Another study discussed in the review showed that on days that participants played pickleball, they averaged over 86 minutes in higher heart rate zones, almost half of which was spent at a moderate to vigorous intensity of 70 to 85% of their maximum heart rate. And this is shown to have positive benefits for cardiorespiratory fitness, fat loss, and blood circulation. So, pickleball can be great for improving fitness, but let's talk about some of the most common injuries now and why they tend to occur. The review article showed that pickleball is generally a safe sport with a low risk of injury, but the authors did mention that many injuries do go unreported, and that's common in a lot of recreational sports. So the rates may be higher than what the research suggests. So why not make that risk even lower through proper resistance and flexibility training? We'll talk about that in a second. But in a couple other studies discussed by the authors in this large review, some of the most common injuries sustained by people were strains and sprains, followed by fractures, and these were sustained primarily through slips, trips, falls, and I love this one, dives. Now, I don't know who in their right mind is diving to get a ball on a hard pickleball court, but let's not take it that seriously, people. It's not sand volleyball. Anyway, I want to go back a little bit and differentiate sprains from strains for your knowledge. A sprain is where a ligament that connects bone to bone gets injured. And a strain is where a tendon that connects muscle to bone or the muscle itself gets injured, commonly referred to as a pulled muscle. Strains commonly happen in the joints, like the ankle, for example, when you're shuffling or stepping sideways and you roll onto the outside of your ankle. And an example of a sprain would feel like a pulled hamstring in the back of your thigh when you quickly sprint forward to get to a ball. But both of these types of injuries can occur at any joint and commonly in the upper body too. So to minimize sprains and strains in pickleball, you need to consider the types of movements you're doing and which muscles are heavily involved, which a lot of people don't think about. I think about this stuff because it's my job to think about it, which is why I'm sharing it with you. So the muscles need to be strong enough to support the movements because you're often moving very quickly and explosively, forward and backward and side to side, from a standstill or while on the move. If you don't have adequate strength and control over your muscles when moving at this speed, your likelihood of rolling an ankle or buckling a knee is going to increase. Also, if you have a sedentary job and you are inflexible, the risk of sustaining a strain in your muscles or tendons will increase because you're often asking them to lengthen beyond their current capacity. At the end of the episode, I'm going to name a bunch of muscle groups to develop and the exercises that develop them that benefit pickleball play and the other sports I'm about to discuss. All right, so let's get into recreational basketball. Approximately 11% of the world's population plays recreational basketball, making it one of the most popular sports worldwide. It's cost effective, only requiring a ball and a decent pair of shoes. And there are basketball courts everywhere, including parks and rec centers, and it does provide many physical and psychological benefits, just like I talked about in pickleball. So it makes sense why many people would want to play it. However, in an article published in 2018 in the Journal of the Physician and Sports Medicine, the authors found that basketball frequently has some of the highest numbers of injuries among the non-contact sports. Specifically, the authors showed that ankle, knee, and shoulder injuries were most common in recreational basketball players, with the ankle and knee being the most common among the three. Some of these injuries include ankle sprains, often caused by sudden changing of directions, and overuse knee injuries like patellar tendonitis or It's often referred to as jumper's knee as well. And that's caused by a lot of jumping and landing in particular. And acute injuries, which tend to happen suddenly versus over time, like an overuse injury. So an acute injury would be like an ACL rupture from poor landing mechanics and changing of directions. This is an important point because jumping and landing generate a lot of what I called earlier ground reaction forces. So to jump off the ground, you need to bend your knees and push into the ground hard enough with your legs to propel yourself upward. But the highest risk for injury happens on the way down when you need to land. If you're lacking strength and control in your ankle, knee, hip, and core muscles, you will not be able to absorb the impact effectively when you land. This can lead to excessive strain on your ligaments and tendons and can create shear or side to side motion and rotational forces in your joints, which the stabilizing structures can't withstand. This is why it's important to practice jumping and landing and things like exercises like slow squats with good form in the gym to train your muscles, tendons, and ligaments to withstand those high forces. So next is recreational soccer. Interesting and embarrassing story for you guys here. So back when I was 18, in my last year of high school, I tore what's called the medial collateral ligament, or the MCL. So it's a ligament that supports the inner part of your knee. I did it kicking my leg out to make a save during a hockey game. It was a partial grade 2 tear, so luckily I didn't need surgery to repair it, but I did need to go to physical therapy for a while. And after the pain subsided, the physical therapist told me I still couldn't do any cutting. So cutting is moving from side to side at high speeds. And I couldn't do that for another few weeks. So in all my adolescent wisdom, I decided that I would still go and play a recreational indoor soccer game, during which I sprained my ankle on the same leg, of course, probably because I still didn't have the strength and stability I needed for cutting at high speeds. I thought my parents were going to kill me. But it was mild, and I recovered fully before I went back to see the therapist, so I was happy about that. But I learned from my own stupidity that the outcome could have been so much worse. Anyway, let's get back to the recreational soccer injury talk for this episode. So I found an article published in 2019 in the Open Sports Sciences Journal that discussed common injuries in recreational soccer players. As you might expect, lower body injuries were quite common, with running, twisting, and turning being the primary mechanisms for injuries in the knee, thigh, and upper leg. I also found it interesting that the authors reported that players in the 30 plus and 40 plus leagues stated less frequently that they had performed core strengthening training prior to the injury compared to their slightly higher level amateur counterparts. And less than half of these 30 plus to 40 plus players had performed a general strength training program. And these players were identified as a high-risk group, showing an injury frequency of 18.7 injuries per 1,000 hours of play. This is important if you're a recreational soccer player, and you should be incorporating core and hip strengthening exercises into your routine a few times a week. If you consider the speed at which the game is played, owing to the length of the field and the player's ability to get to their maximum velocity, it's easy to see why lower body injuries would be quite common if you don't have the muscular strength and control to decelerate yourself quickly with optimal alignment in your joints. This is similar to what is seen in basketball, but even more accentuated because the basketball court is much shorter, not allowing you to reach such high speeds. One thing I want to point out here for you is for you to think about the difference between reactive agility and non-reactive agility. So let me explain these to you. So, reactive agility means that you need to react quickly to an unanticipated event that is not planned for ahead of time. This is what's commonly seen in sports, all right, whether it's soccer, basketball, hockey, pickleball, whatever. And an opponent comes at you out of nowhere or a ball, and you need to adjust your body position to get around them or make a play. And that's in reactive agility. Non reactive agility means that you know what you need to do ahead of time, like knowing which way to turn and when. So, an example of this would be imagine you're on a field and you're running zigzags through cones or doing footwork on a speed ladder. You can anticipate the turn or change of direction, but oftentimes you don't have that luxury when you are playing a recreational soccer game or any recreational sport for that matter. You need to make sure your muscles are strong and flexible enough to withstand those sudden changes of direction and decelerations you experience in games, especially at those really high speeds. So, this means core, hip, and lower body resistance training exercises being put into your routine several days a week. All right, so the last sport I want to talk about is ice hockey, partly because I played it my whole life and I still do, and partly because of the frequency of injuries I see among recreational hockey players that I know. In an article published in 2020 in the Journal of Orthopedics, the authors looked at the trends of adult ice hockey injuries in the United States from 2007 to 2016. They found that the most commonly injured areas of the body were the face. All right, think of the typical hockey player with missing teeth getting hit by a stick. The head, typically from concussions. The shoulder, from shooting or bracing against an opponent. And the ankle, which makes sense due to the stability required to balance on a 3 millimeter thick skate blade. A couple of common diagnoses that caught my eye, once again, were strains and sprains, but also falls and contact with other players. I would also like to add the amount of non-specific lower back pain I've seen in many of the adult hockey players I've shared the ice with. While hockey is a rough sport and not all these injuries can be avoided, strains, sprains, and lower back pain certainly can be minimized through a regular resistance and flexibility training protocol. Hockey is one of those sports that demands movement patterns that the human body was not necessarily designed for. For example, when you push your skate to move forward, you can't simply push straight back like you do when running. You need to rotate your hip outward so your skate blade can catch the ice. Then you can push to go forward. Also, your ankles are restricted with how much they can bend forward and backward, and this can lead to really stiff muscles and Achilles tendons, which can increase the risk of ruptures if you're not maintaining their flexibility off the ice. I also commonly see a lot of groin strains due to the repetitive nature of bringing the leg back under you when after pushing backward and rotating out. And goalies, oh man, I mean, I used to be a goalie, for a really long time, and then after high school, I switched it up, and now I just skate up. After my knee injury, that just didn't want to risk it as much. So. But goalies are especially vulnerable if they lack flexibility and end range strength due to the extreme ranges of motion their hips need to move through. So, resistance training and flexibility training are a must if you play recreational hockey. Otherwise, your body and joints will get stuck in these compensatory movement patterns, and your risk of experiencing pain is going to be higher. So, in summary, let's summarize all this. I'm not telling you, once again, to not play recreational sports. Play them. The benefits are outstanding. All right, they provide a great variety of physical activity that positively impacts health, but do not discount the impact of a proper resistance and flexibility training program to support your recreational sporting endeavors. If you're currently playing sports to get in shape or stay in shape, and you're not hitting the gym to prepare yourself for the demands of your sport, you're increasing your risk of getting injured, either through an overuse or acute injury, plain and simple. But the great thing is that you have a choice. Everyone has a choice as to what they do, and that's awesome. So you can continue doing what you're doing and accept the risk, and that's totally fine. I pass no judgment whatsoever. Or you can choose to reduce your risk of injury in your sport by starting and maintaining a resistance training and flexibility routine. I'm not judging either way. I'm simply providing knowledge and giving you options to think about and consider to help you make the best decision for yourself, whatever that may be. All right. So here are some of the muscles you should be focusing on strengthening in the gym, along with some good exercises for these muscles to improve your recreational play and minimize your risk of injuries. All these exercises are applicable to any of the sports I talked about in this episode, so they're going to benefit any one of those sports. You can find a lot of these videos on my YouTube channel at Wolffpack Fitness, or by doing a simple search for the names of the exercise in the main search bar. But I'll also link to them in the show notes to make it easier for you guys to find. All right, so here we go. You can strengthen your intrinsic foot muscles. So those are the muscles within your foot that help you create a strong, stable arch and stability at the ankle as well. So you could strengthen those by doing something called towel scrunches. You can strengthen your calf muscles by doing heel raises with slow lowering. Your quadricep and hamstring muscles, you can strengthen those by doing exercises like goblet squats and deadlifts. You can strengthen your outer hip muscles by doing Captain Morgan's. No, that is not the beverage, it is the exercise. You can strengthen your inner hip muscles by doing Copenhagen planks, your core muscles by doing planks and Palloff presses, so planks like front planks and side planks, and your shoulder muscles by doing dumbbell bench presses, bent over rows, and banded Y's, T's, and W's. So next is a short list of stretches. So you can stretch your calves by doing something called the combat stretch, the quadriceps and hip flexors by doing the couch stretch, the groin muscles by doing adductor rocks, and the chest muscles by doing the door frame chest stretch. All right, and once again, I'm going to link to all those so they're easy for you guys to find and look at, which is part of this week's action item. So regardless of which sport you play, go on YouTube and watch video tutorials on each of the exercises I just listed. Like I said, I'll link to them. If you already have an exercise routine, that's awesome. If you have not done any of the exercises I've listed, find a way to incorporate some of them into your existing routine. If you do not currently have an exercise routine, pick one lower body, one core, and one upper body exercise from the list and perform 3 sets of 10 repetitions for each exercise, 2 to 3 times this week, and see if you can maintain that routine for a while. Once you get comfortable, add 1 exercise every week until you get to a total of 6 exercises. So 2 lower body, 2 upper body, and 2 core, and maintain that routine. If you have any specific questions, please leave me a comment so I can help you out. All right, that's it for today, Wolffpack. If you're liking the content, please follow and rate the show on Spotify, or leave me a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. I would also love for you to leave me a comment about any additional topics you would like to learn about in the areas of fitness, nutrition, stress management, or psychology. You can also find me on social media on Instagram at coach_A_Wolf and YouTube at Wolffpack Fitness. All right. Thanks for listening. Go get your action item done and tune in next time for the next episode. Take care. Thank you for listening. If you like the content, be sure to follow my podcast, leave a review, and check out the show notes for additional details and links discussed in this episode. My mission is to provide you with actionable knowledge in the areas of fitness, nutrition, stress management, and psychology. It is often said that knowledge is power, but I like to say that knowledge applied is even more powerful. Take what you learned today and find a way to apply it to your lifestyle so you can continue living your best life. Thanks, and be sure to activate the new episode notifications to be the first to learn about new and exciting content. See you next time.